Hello students, myself Saurabh Yashaswee, Assistant Professor at Department of Zoology, RD and DJ College, Munger University, Munger. So during my last lecture, I have talked about the flight adaptation in birds. That what are the flight adaptation? The bird goes for its ideal mode of life. So when we talked about the adaptations, we talked about morphological adaptations as well as the anatomical adaptations. So let us have a very quick revision about those adaptations. So while talking about the morphological adaptations, we found that the bird's body is compact streamlined that helps to minimize the air resistance during the flight. Then they have mobile neck and beak that helps them to rotate 180 degree, which helps them in picking up their food grains, that helps them in planing, that helps them in offense and defense. Then we had found out that the forelimbs in birds have been modified into wings. The hind limbs are very strong and are used for bipedal locomotion. Then we saw that the birds have feathers, which may be rectrices, ramages, or the contour feathers. These feathers have their own functions. Some provide insulation, some provide them with the balance, steering, some helps them to reduce the drag during the flight. So these feathers have their own functions. Then we looked into the hind limb. Hind limb had the flexor tendon, which has the property to get stretched, and this stretch causes exertion of pull, and the bone and the toes automatically bends. This helps in perching. Then we looked into the anatomical adaptations, where we have found that birds have very strong flight muscles, and these flight muscles help them to fly in the air. So we talked about some of the major flight muscles. These were pectoralis major, pectoralis minor, coraca brachialis longus, and coraca brachialis brevis. Then extension carpi and ulnaris, and then tensor muscles, extensor carpi and ulnaris. Then these muscles either help them to go for downward stroke or the upward stroke, or to extend their prepatagium. They have their own unique functions. Then we looked into the endoskeleton, where we found that the whole skeletal frame is compact, centralized, and relatively rigid due to the fusion of bones. So we looked into the skull, and then we looked into the fused thoracic mass. We looked into the synsacrum. We looked into the pygostyle. Then we had the ribs. All the endoskeletal system is fused together. So sternum had a ventral keel-like structure for insertion of highly developed flight muscles. Then we had pectoral girdle, which consists of V-shaped furcula or wishbones, which acts as a spring between the two wings. Then we had hind limbs. Then the hind limbs where we have found that the tarsals, the metatarsals, and the tibias are fused to form the tibiotarsus, and these provide the length, the hind limb with the enormous strength to bear the weight of the body and the bipedal locomotion. So so far we have seen these adaptations. Now there are some adaptations which are related to respiratory system, circulatory system. Then we have excretory system and the reproductive system. So let us go one by one, and we will see that what are those adaptations. So when we talk about the respiratory system, then in birds we have some unique structure, and those unique structures are the air sacs. So they are in this picture. You can clearly see that the pink color structure is the lung, which is inelastic. It is non-elastic. So we have the air sacs here. There are 9 air sacs present in the birds, which helps them to breathe. So when we look into the respiratory system, we have the rate of respiration in bird is very high. The direction of airflow is one way, and when the Respiration takes place in such a way that the inspired air rushes into the lungs, and from lungs it goes to the air sacs and then to the pneumatic cavity of the bones. So this during this process, the air of the lungs is renewed twice at every breath, and during expiration, air reaches the air sac directly through the secondary bronchi. Since the lungs are small, non-elastic, the bird needs to develop a more efficient system for breathing, and the high requirement of the oxygen is maintained by these air sacs. Not only this, their air sac also help them to maintain a little bit buoyancy during the flight. This was the modification, the presence of air sac in the respiratory system in the bird. So when we look into the next system, and in that is the circulatory system, we find that the heart is completely four chambered. It is completely four chambered and it is relatively large as compared to the body size of the birds. The circulation is double circulation, and the portion of hemoglobin, the hemoglobin is a very important component for carrying oxygen to the different parts of the body. So the proportion of hemoglobin present in RBCs is very high, and this high proportion of hemoglobin is responsible for its quick and perfect aeration. So the circulatory system, we look into the heart, relatively large heart in comparison to body size, high proportion of hemoglobin there. So when we look further into the next system, and this system is the Urecotelic excretion. So Urecotelic excretion means that the birds excretes uric acid. So what happens that the excretory system, in the excretory system of the birds, the water of the excretory fluid is reabsorbed in the urinary tubules of the kidney, or in the coprodecum of the cloaca. Means the water is absorbed either in the kidney or the cloacal region. Urinary bladder is absent, and the insoluble uric acid and urates are avoided at once. They are not retained, and this non-retention of the excretory materials help them to reduce the unnecessary weight. So this is one of the modification which helps to reduce the weight of the bird during the flight. So the next system what we talk about is the reproductive system. So when we look into the female reproductive system of the birds, we find that in the adult bird there is one single functional ovary. When we look into the embryo, there are two functional ovaries, but as the bird grows and transforms into the adult, one of the ovary on the right side gets rudimentary, or it gets atrophied. So the only functional ovary that is present is the ovary present at the left side in the female bird. So this presence of one ovary helps in the reduction of the weight. It happens as such that if there is only one ovary present, after fertilization, it can contain only one ovary will contain the eggs, and one ovary containing the eggs is much profitable than the two ovary having the eggs. So it is a manipulated system by the nature that only one of the left ovary of the female reproductive system in bird is functional. So next, when we look into the brain, in the brain we find that the birds have very well functional optic lobe. Optic lobe is very well functioning in birds because their their aerial mode of life needs a correct vision, a better vision, and that is why the optic lobe is well developed. So when we look into the cerebellum, we also find that the corpus striata is well developed, and this well developed corpus striata is much needed for the stability during the flight. So the eyes, talking about the eyes are quite large and is required for the vision. In comparison to the optic lobe, the olfactory lobes are rudimentary or are very reduced. And when we look into the cerebellum part of the brain, it has very well developed uh, it is very well developed, and it has great, and it's and since we know that the cerebellum is responsible for the motor coordination of the body, a well developed cerebellum defines that the bird have a better coordination with their wings during the flight. So it indicates, the well developed cerebellum indicates the delicate sense of equilibrium and great power of muscular coordination belonging to the bird. So far this we have in eyes we have other structures like pectin, which is highly developed. The function is not well so known, but it is said that it provides nutrition to the retina, and it is highly developed, and it helps in the focusing at the objects at larger distance. However, exact function is still not known. So far the part of the flight adaptation in the birds comes to the end, and we will look at a new topic in my next lecture. So till then, stay at home, stay safe.